Hey VC, it's Jonathan, your cheap and cheerful record collector. I hope everybody's doing well out there today. This is going to be a second in a thread started by All the World's a Stage. He was showing the best or your favorite debut albums from each decade. I did the 1960s the other day, and today I'm up to the 1970s. Incredible amount of great debut albums from the 1970s. Just ridiculous. I have close to 50 albums here, so I got to get going on them because we'll be here all day long if I spend a lot of time on it. Just so you know, these are not the best. These are my favorites. If you watch my channel before, you know I don't listen to metal, so you won't see Black Sabbath. I don't listen to prog, so you won't see Emerson, Lake and Palmer and stuff like that. You'll see what I enjoy, my favorites of the decades. Starting in 1970. 1970. Released. New album by the new band, Badfinger. Fantastic album. You all know this one. So I can't take it. I don't mind. Love Me Do. Midnight Caller. Bloodwind, Better Days. It had to be on Apple Records. Badfinger, one of the great debut albums. Also in 1970, one of my favorite artists of all times recorded his first album and released it in 1970, and that's Ry Cooder. And this is his self-titled album. And on this he has Alimony, Old Kentucky Home, How Can a Poor Man Stand Such Times as These, Dark is the Night. Just fantastic album on Reprise or Reprise label. One of my absolute favorites, Ry Cooder. Also 1970, a guy who had been around forever, did mostly studio work, and brought out his first album by himself, and that is Leon Russell, his first album, self-titled again. On this he has a Song for You, Shoot Out on the Plantation, Delta Lady, which he wrote, Give Peace a Chance, etc. Roll Away the Stone. On the album, it's just amazing record. I'm sure everybody knows this one, but 1970. Also 1970, this guy you might have heard of. He was in a group that was pretty popular, and he left and decided to put out his own album. And of course, that's John Lennon. And this is John and Yoko album, Plastic Ono Band from 1970. You don't have to say anything about that. Everyone knows that. Also 1970. A couple of these guys had been in another band we all knew, and that band was Jefferson Airplane. And they went out on their own and did Hot Tuna. And that's Jorma Kaukonen and Jack Cassidy. They're still around, still playing. This was their first album from 1970. They've had electric Hot Tuna since then, and regular acoustic Hot Tuna. And Jorma and Jack have both put out solo albums since then. But this was the first Hot Tuna album. Also 1970, an album that has been perennially on my list of 10 greatest albums of all time. And it's Layla, Derek and the Dominoes, Eric Clapton, Bobby Whitlock, Jim Gordon, Carl Rattle, and of course, Duane Allman. Fantastic. Everyone knows this record. I don't have to say any more about it. Derek and the Dominoes, their only true studio album. Also that year, one of the guys from that band put out his first solo album after being in many different groups, and that's Eric Clapton, his first solo album from 1970. On this album, besides him, there is Rita Coolidge, Bobby Keys, Bobby Whitlock, Leon Russell, Jim Gordon, Bonnie Bramlett, Delaney Bramlett, etc. Carl Rattle, just a who's who of amazing musicians. So the first Eric Clapton album. And finally, the last album from 1970, this guy was in another band, and that band was Traffic, and this was his solo album, and it's Dave Mason, Alone Together. And I can't remember if this is an original. Yep, this is an original. This was like the first colored vinyl I remember seeing in a rock album. This is from 1970. Alone Together, Dave Mason. Great album. Only You Know and I Know. Can't Stop Working. Can't Stop Loving, Waiting on You. What else do we have on here? World and Change, just a song, just one. I don't think he did anything else as good after that. He had some good albums, but nothing on the level of Dave Mason Alone Together. So that finishes up 1970. Now we jump into 1971. Like I said, we got a long way to go. So grab a cup of coffee, pour a glass of wine or a glass of beer. We're going to be here a while. 1970, one of my favorite singers from that era, the great Bonnie Raitt. Saw her a couple of times in the 70s. Fantastic. This is a great, great album. Junior Wells plays harp on some of the songs here. Freebo, A.C. Reed plays tenor sax. Great, great album. Her first one, Bluebird, Mighty Tight Woman, Any Day Now, Any Day Woman, Big Road, Walkin' Blues, I Ain't Blue, Since I Fell For You. Just great, great stuff. The great Bonnie Raitt, 1970. Also 1970, first album by this group. Crazy Horse. No Neil Young yet. There you go. What a great album this one is. Gone Dead Train. Beggar's Day. I Don't Want to Talk About It. Etc. Crazy Horse. 1970. Mostly rock and pop. But now and then I'll throw in a jazz album. And this is one I couldn't resist. And it's the first John McLaughlin album where he's solo, where he leads the band himself. And this is Inner Mounting Flame from 1970. Of course, Billy Cobham, Jan Hammer and piano. Amazing record. John McLaughlin, great, great guitar player. Played with Miles Davis, etc. later on. But this is 1970. One of the great singer-songwriters of that decade and the 80s and the 90s and the 00s and the 010s. Put his first album out, and that was John Prine. His first album, self-titled, Illegal Smile, Hello in There, Sam Stone, Angel from Montgomery, Donald and Lydia. Ridiculous. Great, great songwriter. Gone way too soon. Died during the pandemic. The great John Prine, first album. Another one, first album out in 1971. J.J. Cale and his album Naturally. Everybody always blames Eric Clapton for stealing all of J.J. Cale's style and songs, but they became very good friends, and J.J. Cale was not much of a, didn't like to travel, liked to stay close to home, and didn't like to tour. So Clapton really picked up on his style and made J.J. Cale a little more famous, and there was no animosity between the two of them. This album, his first one, Call Me the Breeze, Magnolia, Crazy Mama, and the original version of After Midnight, etc. Fantastic. J.J. Cale, Naturally. Still staying in 1971, they have this band's first album. Love them. New Riders of the Purple Sage. Actually, I saw them right after this album came out. Opened for the Grateful Dead in New York City at a place called the Manhattan Center. No seats, just a big dance floor. About a 4 or 5 hour concert. What a show that was. New Riders of the Purple Sage. Their first album. And Jerry Garcia does play pedal steel on here. Mickey Hart plays drums. Commander Cody plays piano. Great stuff. All right, now we're in 1972. Moving right along. 1972. Another one from, speaking of Jerry Garcia, another one from the Grateful Dead. And Bob Weir, his first solo album, Ace, came out in 1972. I just got this recently. I knew about it, but I never heard it until very recently when I picked it up at a used record store in Massachusetts. So happy to have it. So great. Ace. Also 72, something completely different than Ace. And the band a lot of people love to hate, but I just love them, is Steely Dan. And this is their album, Can't Buy a Thrill. This is a repress. Some of these are not first pressings. A lot of these are represses. This is a repress, but I don't care. What a great, great album. Donald Fagen, of course, and Walter Becker. Do It Again, Dirty Work, Kings, Midnight Cruiser, Only Fool Would Say, Reelin' in the Years, Change of the Guard. Everyone knows this album intimately. There you go. Can't Buy a Thrill. Also from 1972, another one of my favorites, the great David Bromberg. This is his first album. Saw him a couple of years ago, and he was generous enough to sign that for me. This album has Suffer to Sing the Blues, which is just great. Delia, Lonesome Dave's Lovesick Blues, Mississippi Blues, The Hold Up, Sammy Song. Great, great album. David Bromberg, great guitar player, mandolin player, banjo player, fiddle player, you name it. If it's an instrument with a string on it, he plays it. Also from 72, this guy who was in the Grateful Dead put out his first album by his lonesome is Jerry Garcia. This is Jerry's first solo album. I don't know the name of this. I think it's called Jerry Garcia. These are self-titled, if I remember correctly. Yes, on that great green Warner Brothers label. Jerry Garcia. First solo album. Also 72. Another one of my all-time favorite singers, songwriters, guitarists, Richard Thompson. This is his first album after he left Fairport Convention, I think it was. And on here is Sandy Denny sings with him on this. This is before he put out the albums with his wife, Linda Thompson. So this is some of his solo work. Richard Thompson, Henry the Human Fly. Another amazing record. Great guitar player. Henry the Human Fly. 1972 also saw the release of the only album by this band, at least under this name, and that is Rockpile, Nick Lowe and Dave Edmunds. They put out a number of albums after this under their own names, but it's basically the same band that's on this album. For some contractual reasons, they couldn't call it Rockpile, so they just called it either Dave Edmunds album or Nick Lowe album. But it's basically the same band. But this was the first thing they did, Rockpile, with Teacher Teacher, If Sugar Was as Sweet as You, Play That Fast Thing One More Time, Wrong Again, Pet You and Hold You, When I Write the Book, You Ain't Nothing But Fine. Fine, fine. Great album. Now we're up to 73. 73 will start with the man that defined the West Coast 70s sound as much as anybody. And of course, that's Jackson Browne with his first album. Basically, it was self-titled, but everybody calls it Saturate Before Using because that was on there. Jackson Browne, piano, electric guitar, Albert Lee on guitar, Jim Gordon, Sneaky Pete, Jim Fadden on mouth harp, Les Kunkel on harmonies, David Crosby. The whole gang was there. But yeah, as much as anybody defined the West Coast sound in the 70s, it was Jackson Browne. Another West Coast guy, but my favorite of all those kind of West Coast people, favorite period, is Tom Waits' first album, Closing Time. Came out in 1973. I saw him about 75, I want to say, after Nighthawks at the Diner came out. Actually, I saw him open for Bonnie Raitt first time I saw him. Didn't know who he was, and we went to see Bonnie Raitt at the Avery Fisher Hall in New York City, and this guy comes out, and who is that guy on stage growling and carrying on? And I just knew he was something special. And then about a couple months later, he was playing at the Bottom Line, and I went to see him there. So, I've been a fan ever since. The great Tom Waits, and this has the original version of Old 55, I Hope That I Don't Fall in Love with You, Old Shoes, Martha, Ice Cream Man, Closing Time. Just great. Amazing amount of musicians and artists had debuts in the 1970s. We're still in 1973. How about Doug Sahm? After he left the Sir Douglas Quintet, that they broke up, he went on his own and he put out this album, which is one of my faves. Doug Sahm and Band. It's Going to Be Easy, Your Friends, Poison Ivy, Wallflower, Faded Love, Blues Stay Away From Me, Papa Ain't Salty. And Bob Dylan is on here. David Bromberg is on here. David Fathead Newman. Who else? I did read that Dylan played guitar on this album, and he was so off key and out of whack that they had to edit all his playing out of it. That's what I heard. Anyway, Doug Somm, the great Texas blues man, singer-songwriter. Here's someone a lot of people don't know, but I think he's great. Sort of flown under the radar his whole life, still out there playing. Well, actually, just retired last year, decided he had enough. 1973, saw the release of Garland Jeffries, and this is his album, self-titled. I picked this up at a Goodwill or whatever, and it's signed. The first solo, Garland Jeffries. Ballad of Me, Harlem Bound, Love Light, She Didn't Lie, Eggs, Zoo on the Atlantic. If you don't know Garland Jeffries, just check him out. Soul singer, soul and rock singer. Dr. John's on here also. But wonderful album. As well as a lot of his other albums are great, but this is his first one. Garland Jeffries. And here's a guy you might have heard of, put out his first album in 73. And that's someone called Bruce Springsteen. He's the boss. His first album, Greetings from Asbury Park, did not get great reviews when it came out, didn't sell a lot of records. But back in those days, the companies, when they recorded an artist, let him hang on for 2 or 3 albums, let him sort of get his footing. And of course, we know he did get his footing by his second and third album. He was rocking. This is but a great album, even though, like I said, it didn't do well when it first was released. Blinded by the Light, Growing Up, Lost in the Flood, Spirit in the Night. It's Hard to be a Saint in the City. Great debut by Bruce. One more from 73. This is a singer. She had been in an original band years earlier called the Even Dozen Jug Band under a different name, her real name, Maria D'Amato. Then she went to the Jim Kweskin Jug Band and sang with them, where she met Jeff Moldar, married him, changed her name, and became Maria Moldar. Another great album, there's Maria. Doing great stuff. I mean, she does Any Old Time, Mad Me, My Tennessee Mountain Home, The Work Song, Midnight at the Oasis is off of this album. And this, again, has a who's who of musicians backing her up. Ry Cooder, David Lindley, Jim Keltner, Bill Keith, Spooner Oldham, etc. David Grisman, Dr. John, Klaus Vormann, Jim Keltner, etc. Great album. The great Maria Moldar. I got nothing in for 74. We'll skip to 75. I got one record in 75. And this was a amazing debut in 1975. And it's great. Patti Smith. And this is Wild Horses. Oh, just Horses, I'm sorry. Just Horses. Patti Smith. Again, I was lucky enough to see her right after this came out at a small club in about an hour north of New York City. Maybe there were 200 people in the crowd, and she just fucking blew the roof off the club. She was amazing. She was still young and hungry, and it was quite a show. Horses, Patti Smith, 1975. Then we skip to 1976. Here's another guy, part of that British pub rock scene. I always enjoyed him. You always find his records really cheap. I don't know why, but it's the great Graham Parker, and this is his first album, Howlin' Wind. This is White Honey, which is great. Gypsy Blood, Back to School Days, Soul Shoes, Lady Doctor, Howlin' Wind. I saw him at a club here in Maine probably 15 years ago. He did a solo show. He came out. He was sort of hesitant in the beginning. You can see he was wasn't sure what was going on. By the end of the show, 2 hours later, I mean, literally people are standing on tables, dancing. Everyone's singing Local Girls and carrying on. It's great. A great show. Great act. Great performer. Love me some Graham Parker. I said I don't do much jazz on this bit. I do a lot of jazz in real life, but not on this video. But this one I couldn't pass up. In that same year, 76, he had his first solo album that he was the leader, and it's Jaco Pastorius, amazing bass player. This has, who's on here? Herbie Hancock is on here with him. Wayne Shorter. A lot of other people I don't know off the top of my head, but a great album. And unfortunately died much too young, Jocko. A lot of personal demons, I guess, but great album. He played a lot of jazz albums in the 70s. 76 also saw the first album by this gentleman who had been in a number of different groups before, and that was Peter Tosh. And this is his album Legalize It from 1976. Got to see Peter Tosh in Central Park right after he did that album, that song with Mick Jagger, Walk and Don't Look Back. That was a great concert in the middle of Central Park. Peter Tosh. Also 76 saw the beginning of this man's career and went on, unfortunately, was cut short a couple of years ago, and it's the great Tom Petty. It's Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and his first solo album, and we all know this one, Rockin' Around With You, Breakdown, The Wild One Forever, Anything That's Rock and Roll, Strangers in the Night, Mystery Man, American Girl. We all know this album. The great Tom Petty. That's 76, just a couple of records. 77, got a couple of records from 1977. How about one of my favorite groups of all times? How about The Clash? How about The Clash? So this is two versions of the same album. The one on the right is the American version. The one on the left this is from Holland, the European version. Some songs are the same, some songs are different. All the order is different. So in other words, in the UK version, it starts with Janie Jones, Remote Control, I'm So Bored with the USA, White Riot, Hate and War, What's My Name, Deny, and London's Burning. The American version starts with Clash City Rockers, I'm So Bored with the USA, Remote Control, Complete Control, White Riot, White Man and Hammersmiths, London's Burning, and I Fought the Law. So very different, but great. Glad to have them both. Big Clash fan. Saw them at the end of the career after Mick Jones had left, but I did get to see Strummer, so that was cool. Also in 77, a little bluesy rock. How about a little George Thorogood and Delaware Destroyers? His first album, Madison Blues, one scotch, one bourbon, one scotch, one beer. Come Ride On Josephine, Delaware Slide. Great album, really early, young, hard, hungry. George Thorogood. Here's another guy from one of my favorite groups of all times, and that group is The Band, and this is his first solo album, or album where he led the band, and Levon Helm and the RCO All-Stars. Absolutely love this record. There's the inner sleeve. And on this record, he has Booker T. M. Jones, Dr. John, Paul Butterfield, Donald Duck Dunn, Lou Marini. There's the insert. This is a great album. I'm a big Levon Helm fan. In this album, he does A Washerwoman, The Ties That Bind, Sing, 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 Milk Cow Blues, Havana Moon. Just great. Love that record. How about a little punk from 77? How about Television, Marquee Moon? I'm not a big punk fan, but there are certain albums that really ring and really speak to me, and this is one of them. Just fantastic. Love this record. Television, Marquee Moon. Came with the lyric sheet, which I always love, and the insert. All right. Also in 77, we have a gentleman who started out, put his first album out, and it's the great Elvis Costello. And this is, My Aim Is True. There's the young Elvis. And Welcome to the Working Week, A Miracle Man, Blame It on Cain, Allison, Watching the Detectives, The Angels Want to Wear My Red Shoes. Elvis Costello. Also from 77, Ian Dury. Not the Blockheads, just Ian Dury. And this is his album, New Boots and Panties. Ian Dury, New Boots and Panties from 1977. Love Ian Dury. On Stiff Records. I'm going to say this. No, this is U.S. press. On Stiff Records. Big fan of Ian, and this is one of my favorite albums by him. And then, again, another one of my favorite bands of all time put out their first album in 1977, and it is Talking Heads 77. Unfortunately, I never got to see them live, which really missed out on that, which is a shame. But this is an amazing record. Love Comes to Town, Happy Day, The Book I Read, Don't Worry About the Government, Psycho Killer, Pulled Up, etc. Great, great, great. 1978. The decade's starting to close down. 78, still got a couple of great albums. How about the original first recording by Dire Straits? Mark Knopfler and Friends and Family, Down to the Waterline, Six Blade Knife, Sultans of Swing, Wild West End. A great debut by a great band. Dire Straits, been a big fan ever since. Big fan of Mark Knopfler and all his solo work as well. Also in 78, we had The Police. Now, no matter what you think of Sting now, when he was doing this stuff, he was really hot. The band was hot. And this is great. Next to You, So Lonely, Roxanne, Can't Stand Losing You, Born in the 50s. Great stuff. The Police. Also 1978, something a little different. Devo, Are We Not Men? Definitely coming from left field back in 1978. No one expected this, knew what to expect, and when they heard this, it was so different and so great. Devo, Are We Not Men? 1978. And now wrapping it up in 1979. Only got a couple from 79. First one, again, one of my favorites. And this came out 2 different versions. And it's Joe Jackson, Look Sharp. And it came out as 2 10-inch or the 33 RPM. Both the 12-inch. The 10-inch is supposed to have a button here that said Look Sharp, but got lost. When I bought this, it wasn't there. Opens up, which is sort of nice. You don't have that in the original, on the 12-inch. And it's 2 10-inch records. Joe Jackson, Look Sharp. It's a U.S. pressing, which is weird because the U.S. didn't do many 10-inch records, especially in the 70s. But when I saw this, I had to grab it. And here's the original 33 12-inch. One More Time, Sunday Papers, Is She Really Going Out With Him? Baby Stick Around, Look Sharp, Do the Instant Mash. Great, great albums. Joe Jackson. And we'd end up 1979, end up the decade with a little ska and just fun stuff. And that's Madness, One Step Beyond. And of course it has One Step Beyond, Night Boat to Cairo, which I just love. In the Middle of the Night, Bed and Breakfast Man, Swan Lake, Rockin' in A Flat, Madness, Chipmunks Are Go. So that's the 70s for me. Obviously, other people have other choices that they would choose for their favorite debut albums of the 1970s. If you're going to do it, let me see it. Put them out there. Let's see videos showing them. And I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Give me a like. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And make a comment. I always answer all comments. I do my best to answer them all. I usually get to them all at some point in the future. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, peace.